We're joined today by Bill Scher. He is senior writer at Campaign for America's Future. Bill, let's start with midterm polls. Do you agree with the assessment from Nate Silver and Sam Wong that the Republican Party will probably take over the Senate?
Probably, I think, is a little strong. I mean, they're basing things on a snapshot of the polls. I think if you take the top lines of all the polls that came out last week, you would say yes, they have the best shot. What you're not going to know from the polls is what is the Democratic capacity to pull in unlikely voters on election day. Every pollster has its own likely voter screen, which is a little subjective, and every pollster does it differently. You see in a number of states a gap between how Democrats perform amongst registered voters and likely voters. Democrats say they are putting a lot of emphasis on ground game. They proved themselves in 2012 that they could get a lot of unlikely voters when people didn't expect it. The states in 2014 are different than the states that were competing in 2012, so we don't know if that can be easily replicated, but it might. And that's why you want to be careful not to treat a poll as predictive, because how the game actually gets played on election day is what's going to be determinative.
Now, comparing to 2012, we must consider, I think, that in general, the party who holds the White House tends to not do that well with those less likely voters at a midterm election, historically speaking. Isn't that true?
Well, of course, and you tend to have, took on the Democratic side a lack of enthusiasm after the grind of government, runs its course. You can't get everything that you want all the time. People get a little deflated because of that. So that tends to depress turnout. What Democrats were able to solve in 2012 was let's use our online technology to identify those unlikely voters and then get staff who are close in that community to do some person-to-person contact. Person-to-person contact tends to be the best driver of turnout. That recipe worked because people thought Obama couldn't replicate his turnout levels from 2008, and he largely did because they picked that lock. So can they do that again in 2014? I don't know.
You wrote an article titled "Good News, Democrats, You're Going to Lose." So let's for a second assume that the scenario in which the Democrats certainly, of course, don't take over control of the House and lose control of the Senate does actually come to fruition. In what sense would that be good for Democrats?
Well, where it'd be good is that where it's normally bad is when your opposition party is increasingly popular, is pushing a popular agenda, is organized and unified, and can put that agenda on the president's desk, put that president in a difficult political spot, and set the stage to extend that momentum into the subsequent presidential election. In this case, you have a Republican Party that is still highly unpopular. Congressional Republican approval is at 19% right now. That is lower than approval for congressional Democrats and even more lower than approval for President Obama, which is in the low 40s. So, number one, you're not seeing this election, no matter how it turns out, you're not seeing a pendulum shift, a pendulum swing ideologically in favor of Republicans. You're seeing a general disgust that Washington isn't working well. The Republicans can take advantage of in right-leaning states. This is the other aspect of 2014 that is relevant. This is not a national referendum. This is a race that's being fought out in a handful of states that lean right, that have a reddish tint, because those are the states that happen to be up for re-election in the Senate in 2014. It's a different map in 2016, where a lot of blue state Republicans will be on the line. So they might win for reasons that are not directly relevant to their popularity levels. And number two, they're not running on a clear agenda. You can't find an ad in these Senate campaigns that says, elect me and I will pass this legislation that the lovely House Republicans had passed and the Democrats are blocking.
Well, that's true, but let's explore that a little further, because ever since President Obama was first elected and Republicans all got together and they said, we're going to get in the way. If President Obama really wants to do things, he's going to have to go around us, under us, or through us, but it is not going to be with us. Right. And it seems to me that if they do take control of the Senate, that the obstructionism will continue. This will do two things. Number one, it will allow Republicans to campaign that President Obama hasn't done much, while simultaneously forcing him to use executive orders to get things done. These are both things that could be useful to Republicans generally for 2016 for campaigning.
Well, I disagree in this respect. Republicans have already obstructed the vast majority of the Obama agenda since 2010. That was the bad election.
Right.
That was, that wasn't good for Democrats to lose that one.
Right.
But that's already baked in the cake. That's not going to change after 2014 unless something wildly unexpected happens and Democrats take the House. So what you have instead is a increase in Republican responsibility for the governing of the country. They own the whole kit and caboodle if they have the entire Congress, but without an agenda, without a game plan. Instead, they'll be exporting the dysfunctional rule of the House, and the simmering Republican Civil War gets expanded to a second front.
Well, I was hoping you would say exactly that, because this is where I completely disagree. What evidence do we have? We have a little bit of evidence from the government shutdown, right? Some of the polling after the government shutdown was where people seemed to realize that actually, in spite of President Obama being the president, that it was as a result of actions taken by Republicans that the government shutdown happened, and it wasn't a good thing. But broadly speaking, what evidence do we have that an electorate under a Democratic White House will hold the Republican House and Senate responsible when it comes to the next election for inaction? I don't know that we have anything we can point to.
Well, let's think it through a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, the shutdown did happen.
Right.
We saw how that worked.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, cooler heads prevailed, and Boehner and McConnell pulled them back from the abyss. And that's why they haven't completely gone up in flames this year. But it was pretty ugly getting to that point, and it exposed a very chaotic and dysfunctional Republican Party that still has not recovered brand-wise. They're not really seen as a serious party at this point. 19% approval again. What are they going to do in 2015? Now, the government will be open for a limited period of time. We don't know how long, because they've only kept it open now through December. They'll have to pass another bill in December to extend it further. I'm guessing it's not going to be for 2 years. The debt ceiling is only suspended till March 2015. Treasury can probably keep it going for a few months after that, but probably sometime middle of 2015, debt limit's going to hit. What has McConnell said? McConnell has said that if he's the majority leader, he will put spending bills on the table with riders that restrict executive authority. Which it's hard to envision what he could put on Obama's desk that Obama would gleefully sign. So let's presume Obama vetoes these bills. Well, then what happens? They have the same reckoning where the pragmatists in the Republican Party say, look, it's not really a good idea, people, for us to have another shutdown. That was really bad for us last time. We're going into 2016. We gotta swallow the bitter pill and just keep this thing open. Mm-hmm. Or an expanded Tea Party caucus. You got a handful of Republicans in the House who've said, I'm not even going to support Boehner for Speaker if I get elected. These would be new freshman Congress people replacing more genteel ones. And in the Senate, you're going to have Ted Cruz and Rand Paul running for president on the Senate floor, making McConnell's life miserable. So they don't have an end game for McConnell's stated strategy to squeeze Obama with poison pills.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with the individual points you're making. I just am very skeptical, and we'll just have to wait and see. I'm very skeptical that the voters will punish Republicans for this. I don't know that we're going to see that. We'll eventually figure it out. Last thing quickly I wanted to ask you about. Increasingly, I'm getting email from people saying, hey, David, you really need to be talking about what is a drastic distinction between Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren. And some Clinton staffers have tried to say, well, what specific policy positions do these two potential candidates differ on? And they are numerous, those differences, by the way. What do you see as the importance level of what seems to be this drawing of a distinction between Warren and Hillary, neither of whom we know for sure will be candidates yet? And I think in the end, it will only be Hillary who's a candidate.
Right. Yeah, number one, I mean, to take Warren at her word, she's not running. She's been pretty emphatic about
Yeah.
that. And she's sort of not doing anything right now to prepare for a run. She's not meeting activists in Iowa and New Hampshire, for example. There's no infrastructure there for her to easily jump in. And Hillary, by all of her actions, suggests that she is running. Now, you may have a Bernie Sanders or a Jim Webb. Those are two people who are doing some things to prepare, who are talking about Wall Street, anti-bank populist type themes that may cut against how Hillary's going to run. Now, what we don't know is, how is Hillary going to run? You know, is she going to respond to those sorts of challenges by embracing a lot of Warren's ideas when it comes to restricting the power of banks? Or is she going to, draw a line in the sand the way she has with foreign policy and say, look, this is what I believe, this is what I stand for. I think we have to have a more nuanced, moderate path on these subjects. And if the left wants to take some pot shots at me, have at it. We don't know how she's going to straddle that. But there is potential for an open airing of differences between the more business-friendly side of the Democratic Party and the more populist side. But it really is going to come down to how Hillary decides to run, and that we really don't know.
Yes, I think that is absolutely clear. We have no idea which version of Hillary would be the one that runs. We've been speaking with Bill Scher, senior writer at Campaign for America's Future. Bill, pleasure as always.
Thank you.